That was more than you bargained for, I'm afraid. First of all, that car was way too big. But a narrow escape it was. Maybe it's putting too much on the shoulders of our next speaker. But hopefully she can talk out of this self-created depression here. We are honored to introduce to you Miss Ndileka Mandela, the eldest granddaughter of Nelson Mandela. It gives me goosebumps just to introduce her. Here she is, Ndileka Mandela.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, the media here, all protocol observed. I extend warm greetings to you all. Allow me to introduce myself and my esteemed team. I am Ndileka Mandela, the eldest granddaughter of Nelson Mandela and Evelyn, hailing from the Eastern Cape, South Africa. Accompanying me is my colleague and COO, and executive board member of the Ndileka Mandela Foundation, Susan Novella. It is indeed an honor for us to be present at this esteemed Impact Summit in Europe, where leaders and visionaries gather to discuss and address pressing global issues. Today, I stand before you to share the remarkable legacy of my grandfather and my personal journey. In my 59 years of life, I have learned that our upbringing profoundly influences our perspectives and actions. Raised by my grandmother, a resilient entrepreneur who defied societal norms, and inspired by the unwavering faith of my grandfather, I learned the values of perseverance and compassion. My grandfather's steadfast belief in the power of our cultural heritage to unite and uplift our nation inspired me to establish the foundation under its 3 pillars of health, education, and youth development. We strive to continue his legacy of service to the underprivileged. I am proud to lead the Ndileka Mandela Foundation, and I also serve as Deputy Chair of the Nelson Mandela Museum, preserving our cultural heritage and advocate for gender equality through initiatives like Me Too movement. Additionally, I am committed to addressing climate change, which I term as climate apartheid. Climate change stands as one of humanity's greatest challenges, reflecting our disconnection from the natural world and the persistent inequities between the global north and the south. I echo the United Nations term climate apartheid, emphasizing how the poorest, predominantly people of color in the global south, bear the brunt of climate change while contributing the least to its causes. The parallels between apartheid and the current global climate crisis are evident. Just as apartheid privileged a few at the expense of the majority, today, the wealthiest nations continue to benefit from the exploitation of the environment, while vulnerable communities suffer disproportionately. My grandfather's fight against apartheid was a battle for justice and equality. Similarly, we must unite to combat climate apartheid and ensure a more inclusive world for all. Collaboration is key as we work towards renewable energy sources and equitable climate finance for vulnerable regions. A few years ago, the United Nations published a controversial report warning that by 2030, the world will be on the brink of climate apartheid. But on the cusp of the United Nations Summit on Climate Change, hosted by the UAE, I believe climate apartheid is already here. The struggle Madiba fought against apartheid is far from over. Half of the global population live on less than $6.85 a day. These 4 billion people who have the smallest carbon footprint on our planet are yet the most climate vulnerable. This is a direct consequence of an unequal global political and economic structure, whose laws, regulations, and processes systematically discriminate against this other half, the vast majority of whom are people of color in the Global South. That is why I believe that despite the end of apartheid in South Africa, today we face a new, more expansive global system of climate apartheid that is ruining the lives of billions. We must be clear-eyed about how the climate status quo is underpinned by the same type of racist assumption and attitude that my grandfather struggled against. His fight to end apartheid in South Africa was born from a desire to dismantle an entrenched system based on racism, subjugation that destroyed the lives of millions of black South Africans and humiliated them daily. Despite his victory, apartheid has been exported into the heart of the entire global system. In apartheid South Africa, wealth, power, and opportunity exclusively belong to white South Africans. Similarly, the most egregious polluters in the global north continue to largely reap the benefits, while those in the global south are forced to shoulder the destructive consequence of rising temperatures, leading to lives of suffering and chaos. Many of my fellow climate activists would concur that the most significant fossil fuel expansion plans are being spearheaded by the United States, Canada, Russia, Iran, China, and Brazil. European banks have invested 1.3 trillion in fossil fuels since 2015, including 130 billion in 22 alone, despite the EU's stated intention to advocate for a fuel fossil phase-out. Banks in the US, Canada, and Japan collectively account for the majority of global fossil fuel financing. For oil-producing countries, nation in Africa, Western calls for a fossil fuel phase-out not only appear profoundly hypocritical, but are also potentially catastrophic. Countries like the UAE have only recently achieved prosperity through the development of their oil and gas resources. Africans are questioning why they are being denied the same opportunities. There is a sense that after amassing vast wealth over centuries of carbon pollution dating back to colonial rule, the West is now admonishing the rest of the world for seeking similar paths to development. However, since the beginning of the year, over 36 million people in Africa have been impacted by drought, famine, heavy rainfall, and cyclones, resulting in hundreds of deaths and tens of thousands displaced. For instance, back home in South Africa, especially in KwaZulu-Natal, we experienced severe floods last year, mirroring the situation in countries like Mozambique and Malawi, which were struck by cyclones, as well as Tanzania and Libya, which were faced by floods. This underscores the urgency of following in Madiba's footsteps. His approach always emphasized keeping the dialogue open and engaging with all stakeholders to bring about change. While it's easy to assign blame, we cannot allow this to hinder our chances of reaching a global climate agreement. Developing nations in Africa and across the global south urgently require the world to rally around the priorities highlighted by the COP28 presidency, albeit imperfectly, namely significantly increasing renewable energy, reducing global reliance on fossil fuels, and mobilizing trillions to climate finance for the most vulnerable nations. This is the only way to counteract the unfolding global climate apartheid inequity. In this battle, akin to my grandfather's struggle, we cannot afford for perfect circumstances. Failure to act will force millions of people into destitution or compel them to embark on perilous migration routes away from disaster zones in the years to come. My grandfather recognized that the fight to end apartheid in South Africa was a fight for all those who were marginalized and silenced. His legacy remains unfinished, with much work still to be done. Climate change represents a significant threat to public health, exacerbating existing challenges such as air pollution, extreme weather events, and food insecurity. Drawing from my experience as a former ICU nurse and a passionate advocate for health equity, I have directly observed the devastating impacts of climate change on community well-being. The escalating temperatures, amplified rainfall, and the proliferation of diseases like cholera and diarrhea underscore the pressing need for climate-resilient healthcare systems and community adaptation measures. From the surge in disease outbreaks to the heightened levels of food insecurity, climate change magnifies health disparities, particularly affecting low-income and marginalized communities. Tackling climate change demands comprehensive strategies that prioritize both environmental sustainability and resilience to public health. Integrating climate change adaptation with poverty alleviation strategies is crucial, as both poverty and climate vulnerability exacerbate each other's impact. Historically, the private sector has been overlooked in adaptation planning, despite its potential to significantly contribute to a comprehensive approach. In rural and vulnerable areas like drylands and coastal regions, poverty restricts communities' ability to respond to climate change effects. While the public sector typically leads adaptation efforts, it often faces challenges such as limited resources and bureaucratic hurdles, particularly in impoverished regions. Conversely, the private sector possesses unique resources, knowledge, and adaptability, making it a valuable partner in climate adaptation endeavors. Research indicates that involving the private sector in climate adaptation can yield innovative and effective solutions. Small and medium-sized enterprises in particular have the ability to adapt swiftly to changing environmental conditions. Through collaboration with the private sector, communities can devise adaptive strategies tailored to their specific needs and challenges. An example of successful private sector-led adaptations emerges from a dryland area in China, where a win-win strategy was implemented to address both climate change and impacts and poverty. The private sector played a pivotal role in this initiative, leveraging its resources and expertise to achieve sustainable development outcomes. The involvement of private sector stakeholders, in particular governance, proved instrumental in ensuring project successes. Nevertheless, significant obstacles to adaptation persist in disadvantaged regions. Poverty traps, inadequate infrastructure, and limited access to a resource impede communities' capacity to adapt effectively. Enhancing a community's adaptive capacity is crucial for breaking the cycle of poverty and vulnerability to climate change. This may entail augmenting household income, education level, and local environmental knowledge. While public sector interventions often emphasize infrastructure enhancements, the private sector can offer complementary solutions that are cost-effective and tailored to local context. Integrating socio-economic development with climate adaptation efforts is essential for attaining social and ecological progress. However, such integration is often absent in current approaches, underscoring the necessity for a more inclusive and collaborative strategies. In conclusion, addressing climate change and poverty necessitates a concerted effort that engages all stakeholders, including the private sector. By harnessing the capabilities and resources of the private sector, communities can build resilience to climate change while advancing sustainable development goals. Participatory governance and integrated approaches are paramount to achieving enduring solutions that benefit both people and the planet. There are various incentives that can be implemented for climate change. For instance, increase adaptivity capacity, where the private sector actors can boost their adaptive capacity by implementing measures like infrastructure improvements. Through investing in adaptation strategies, they can mitigate risk linked to climate change, sustain productivity, and ensure business continuity. They can also proactively addressing climate change risk allows the private sector to minimize potential disruptions to operations and maintain an even enhance productivity. This can result in increasing profitability and better resource management, benefiting both the company and stakeholders. Investment in adaptation measures such as road networks and irrigation systems yield benefits not only for the private sector, but also for the local community. Shared infrastructure can improve market access, enhance agricultural productivity, and spur economic development region. Knowledge exchange. Collaboration between private sector and communities promote knowledge sharing, leading to heightened adaptive capacity and poverty alleviation. The private sector can contribute technological expertise while communities offer valuable local and environmental knowledge, enhancing the effectiveness of adaptation and efforts. Cost sharing. When private sector investment in adaptation measures benefit the local community, for instance, in flood control infrastructure, part of the cost burden shift from the community to the private sector. This demonstrates corporate responsibility and nurtures positive relationships between business and communities. Economic opportunities. The private sector can identify economic prospects arising from climate change, such as capture and reuse of flood water. Adaptation measures represent investment, not only shield business from climate risk, but also potentially boost profits through innovative solutions. Technological advancements. Private sector investment in technologies like cellular networks and weather forecasting systems provide communities with access to valuable information and early warning systems for extreme weather events. And this enhances resilience, especially in impoverished and remote regions. Over and above distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I urge you all to consider investing in South Africa and in the SADC region, which holds immense potential. I'll just mention the few potentials that are available in the SADC region. It is a thriving, emerging market. It is a diverse community. It's attractive to multinationals, progressive legal framework, market access, rich natural resources. There's also infrastructure excellence, specifically in the SADC region and also in South Africa. There's also increased prospect of trade among SADC countries and gains expected from the SADC free trade. There is also increased investment, higher total factor productivity growth from better access to technology. Within the SADC region, several countries have very low tariffs on capital goods, notably South Africa. Whether a free trade area moves towards the lowest group-wide tariffs per sector or not, all SADC members would benefit from lower prices of capital goods, stimulating investment. Moreover, more rational tariff regimes might encourage greater partnerships in foreign investment. Finally, smaller countries are likely to experience improvements in their total factor productivity due to South Africa's more advanced technological experience. In conclusion, I'd like to say Mandela's legacy serves as a potential reminder of the potency of unity, perseverance in the face of injustice. Much like his efforts to rally people against apartheid, we must unite to confront climate apartheid and forge a more equitable world. I express my sincere gratitude to Phenix Capital for organizing this impactful event and fostering collaboration among change makers. Together, let us persist in our pursuit for a future where environmental justice and human dignity reign supreme. I thank you.